Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to my channel. I don't know if I'm going to put these out in the consecutive orders that I did them, but if I do, welcome to my second coronavirus here as we talk about this shitty segment Bill Maher did about quote unquote virus shaming.
And finally, new rule, you can't yell at someone for breaking a rule you just made up. Scientists, yes, scientists who are generally pretty liberal, have been naming diseases after the places they came from for a very long time. Zika.
So he's going to mention a whole bunch of diseases, and only one of them is going to come from within the last decade. That's named for a location. And several of the ones that the location it came from aren't actually locations where it came from, right? So we get into this.
Is from the Zika forest.
Yep, and this was named in the 1930s when it was discovered.
Ebola from the Ebola River. Hantavirus.
1930 or 1940s for the Ebola virus.
The Hantan River.
So this is wrong. Like, this is flat wrong. Like, so it's named after the Hantan River, the Hanta virus, but there's a whole family of viruses called Hantaviridae. It's named after that because in the 70s, one of the specific species within that family and it's not species because they're not alive or any animals that and stuff there, but one of the strains, excuse me, within that family of viruses caused an outbreak in the 70s over there. And so that's where the virus got the name from. But hantavirus strains exist all over the world, right? And we have plenty here. So if you get hantavirus here in the U.S., you actually aren't getting a virus that originated in Hanta, by the Hantan River in South Korea, I think it is. And I find it funny because you're going to get into the PC outrage and you can't do all this other stuff. There was controversy over naming the particular virus at the time, which was I think in the 90s. It was going to be named after a Indian reservation in there where they found it here, that particular virus. And there was, I believe it was, I hate doing this, I believe it might have been the Navajo. Maybe, don't quote me on that, the exact tribe that had an issue with it. But yeah, it was going to be called that. And they said, nope, don't call it that. That's going to stigmatize it there. And so because it came from, the Four Corners region, or where it was discovered, they wanted to call it the Four Corners virus. And there was still outcry against that. So we're talking, over a quarter century ago, right? So these kind of arguments have been around for a while. On, hey, maybe we shouldn't name these after places. And all of them, outside of MERS, which you'll bring up later, were named in the 70s or earlier, right? But yeah, hantavirus is all over the here. So the actual name of the virus that causes hantavirus syndrome here in the U.S. is the Cynombre virus, which is the virus no name.
There's the West Nile virus and guinea worm and...
All right, guinea worm actually doesn't come from Guinea, right? Look at that name, Dracunculus metanensis, right? So the scientific name is named after Medina, right? And guinea worm it picked up. I want to say it was well, you know what? Better to make sure I get this accurate. We'll pull up the Wikipedia article here on guinea worm and when they decided to do this. But this wasn't something. So where is it? And the guinea worm vaccines, but I mean historically, from Egypt, right? Is the oldest thing that we have. That's why sometimes it's called the Pharaoh's worm, because we found a guinea worm inside of a mummy from the New Kingdom, Egypt. So I mean, even this name isn't right. We give it this name in there because I think it was, what was it, Avicenna or was it Averroes? Where was it? Why is it named? And they also, like in the Wikipedia article says, fiery serpent probably refers to guinea worm, right? In the Bible, they believe it's here, but where is it? Where is the stuff? Who was it in medieval in the medieval Middle East? But the point being is, guinea worm. It's not from. I mean, you can get it in the Guinea region and stuff like that, and that's where the name kind of became where it is. Fuck, I'm not seeing it in here. Control find. Let's see. Heavy. Was it not Avicenna or was it Everest? Anyways, not the point. No, it's not found. It's like I said, the oldest known place we have it is Egypt, and like I said, there's probably biblical references to it as the fiery serpent. They argue, right? And then it was brought over to the Arabian Peninsula, and it was named by famous Islamic doctor was named, and that's why it's the Dracunculus medinensis, right?
Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and of
Yep, that's from the 19th century name.
course, the Spanish flu.
Spanish flu was not named because it came from Spain. I mean, how can you fuck this up so badly, right? I mean, first you had the guinea worm, which is bad enough. But the Spanish flu, we know damn sure didn't come from Spain, right? We don't know exactly where it came from, right? There's hypotheses ranging from Kansas to the UK and everything like that. And the only reason it's called the Spanish flu is because Spain, during World War One, was neutral in the war and didn't have the war censors censoring it, right? We have data and writings about this particular flu that would become the global pandemic that it was, and it was suppressed by the countries that were in war, right? But it wasn't in Spain, and it eventually killed the King of Spain, and so that's where the Spanish flu comes from. The name comes from it. It doesn't come because it came from Spain, so he's wrong again on this one.
MERS stands for Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. It's plastered.
And this is the most recent one that he'll ever, in terms of naming conventions, right? And so that was about 8 years ago.
All over airports, and no one blogs about it. So why should China get a pass? Congressman Ted Lieu tweeted, "The virus is not constrained by country or race. Be just as stupid to call it the Milan virus." No, that would be way stupider because it didn't come from Milan. And if it...
You just mentioned the Spanish flu. You mentioned guinea worm. Again, things that didn't come from those places, right? They come from other places, and that's why we don't have them named that way. But, you know, fuck Bill Maher. Bill Maher doesn't care about facts, right? He's got his own soapbox he wants to get on about it.
I guarantee we'd be calling it the Milan virus. Jesus fucking Christ. Can't we even have a pandemic without getting offended? When they named Lyme disease after a town in Connecticut, the locals didn't get all ticked off.
So we knew about Lyme's disease well before the Lyme's the Lyme's disease name became popular. And I think that was, again, in the 70s. It was about here. But the oldest recording of a disease similar to Lyme's disease, or what we think is Lyme's disease, comes from 18th century in Scotland, even though it's an American-born pathogen because of all the ticks and stuff. And it's from genetic data. It's been in Americas for, thousands of years, right? So, again, he's wrong on this one. We've known about this. There's several other names before Lyme's became the popular name for it, that it was named under. A bunch of different names. So we were aware of it. We knew about it for centuries and stuff like that. Yeah.
Ticked off.
Ugh, these kind of comedians really need an audience to try to make funny. I mean, that's that is lame as fuck.
Seriously, it scares me that there are people out there who would rather die from the virus than call it by the wrong name. This isn't about vilifying a culture.
But I mean, that's why people want to use the China virus name or the Chinese virus, right? Um, he'll list plenty of other viruses that he'll claim. Not all of them came from China, but claim came from China, but that don't carry the Chinese name on it. And people want to prevent the hate crimes and stuff. They're concerned about stigmatization, right? So looking at, there was Sophane from Poison the Well on Twitter posted a image of somebody that, wearing a mask and then said "fuck," racial slur. Wow, tripping over my tongue there. Racial slur for Chinese people on it, right? You had John Oliver covered stories that Chinese restaurants, people working in Chinese restaurants and people going to Chinese restaurants were blaming, Chinese Americans there, right? Because they think it's the China virus and stuff there.
This is about facts. This
Then maybe bring some actual facts, Bill, right? You brought none.
about life and death. We're barely 4 months into this pandemic, and the wet markets in China, the ones where exotic animals are sold and consumed, are already starting to reopen. The PC police say it's racist to attack any cultural practice that's different than our own.
No, they don't. And yes, the wet markets should not be a thing with the live animals, right? The live animals and stuff is what causes it. Now he's gonna in this video push the bat soup narrative, which is garbage, right? You don't contract the virus that way. And we'll get to it when he talks about swine flu in there, and we'll talk about why he's wrong about swine flu and where that came from.
I say liberalism lost its way when it started thinking like that and pretended that forcing a woman to wear this was just a different way instead of an abhorrent.
So this is Bill's Islamophobia coming in. Like I said, if this wasn't forced, if this was 100% by the volition of the women, and that's their cultural practice, fine, whatever, who cares? I agree that this being forced on women is a human rights violation and something Islam should clean up, especially the radical sects. But like, if you choose to do this, like if you're in a like in America or whatever, and you choose to wear any kind of, the burqa, niqab, any of that stuff, and you do it just because religious reasons, and it's your choice, right, to pick up and show your devotion to your God that way. I particularly don't like just in general there, but I mean, if that's all your choice and it's not being forced on you, what am I going to say about it, right? Choose to dress how you want to dress, right? I got to support that when you want to dress skimpy, and I gotta support that when you really want to dress down. But I mean, to bring this into here, right? To bring his ranting and raving about this is really a lot of, Bill's bigotry.
Abhorrent human rights violation. It's not racist to point out that eating bats is batshit crazy.
Yes, it is, because you're spreading false information about how this virus spreads, right? Bat meat contains nutrients, bush meat in general, and without access. So the problem with the wet markets is that they're live, right? So you got all the fluids, you got the shit, the piss, everything else that gets in there. And that's what actually spreads the virus. I mean, we have the same issue with swine flu and working in like factory farms, but you're not going to see Bill up here talking about how it's perfectly fine to eat pigs still, right? Even though, workers that work close in those conditions with the pigs and stuff in the slaughterhouses and factory farms are susceptible for transmission of swine flu, right? But he didn't know that. He doesn't care about his facts. This is him being fucking racist, right? And pretending that he's not, right?
In 2007, researchers at the University of Hong Kong wrote, the presence of a large reservoir of SARS-CoV, like viruses in horseshoe bats, together with the culture of eating exotic animals in southern China, is a time bomb. Dr. Fauci.
So, they're a time bomb because of the wet markets, right? Because of the live animal settings. They're not a time bomb because you're eating the meat, right? That's not the case, right? If you go through that information beyond just that segment, Even in that article, it says as much.
Fauci says we should force a global closure of the wet markets because the current crisis is a, quote, direct result of them. On Monday, the UN's
Yeah. The wet markets are going to be a place where diseases come in, but just like factory farms are, right? So, like I said, we're getting to swine flu. He's going to say swine flu. I'll get ahead of myself here, but he's going to say swine flu. So the swine flu pandemic in 2009 came from China. No, swine flu is in 80% of the domestic, estimated at least 80% of the domestic population of pigs, right? And so it's around the world. It's all over the world. And swine flu was actually traced back to a factory farm in Mexico, right? For that certain pandemic, that particular pandemic, not China. But he's going to say it's from China. And so this isn't about facts for Bill, right? This is Bill being a bigoted asshole and pretending that he's just following the facts, man.
acting head of biodiversity said the same thing. So when someone says, what if people hear Chinese virus and blame China? The answer is we should blame China, not Chinese Americans. But we can't stop telling the truth because racists get the wrong idea. There are always going to be idiots out there who want to indulge their prejudices.
And you're one of them in trying to spread this stuff and saying, hey, we should do the Chinese virus thing. I mean, it's so fucking stupid. You don't get it from eating bat meat, just like you don't get swine flu from eating pork meat, right? You get it from, and the wet markets should be shut down. The live animals sitting in there, definitely, right? But it's not that eating the meat is bad for you. And, I think it's like 29% or 30%, something like that, of people in the Pacific Rim there that were eating bats as part of bushmeat and stuff is the only way they can get their meat. It's cheaper than livestock, right? So they're forced in those situations. That's the stuff they got to choose. Like, again, not bad for you. You can eat it. It's fine.
But this is an emergency. Don't we have bigger tainted fish to fry? Jesus, if the sun was exploding, Twitter would pile on the first guy who called it a dwarf star. Sorry.
The sun exploding isn't a dwarf star. What? Like, I mean, that's just caring about facts and shit and saying stupid shit like this is, he doesn't care about facts, right? He's got his opinions, his feels, and he's going to try to cherry pick whatever he can to fit that, right?
Americans, we're going to have to ask you to keep two ideas in your head at the same time. This has nothing to do with Asian Americans, and it has everything to do with China. We can't afford the luxury anymore of non-judginess towards a country with habits that kill millions of people everywhere.
So, there's an article, I've seen others who have done, hey, we should call the coronavirus the Chinese virus and stuff like that. There's a study that said, hey, China had acted 3 weeks earlier. They could have stopped the spread more than it was. But, I mean, let's look at, like we just did, like in a separate video, I just did the coverage of Trump's propaganda on how great his measures were, right? Even though his was, I have to go back and look at the exact dates, but I'm pretty sure it's, at least 3 weeks between the World Health Organization declaring it a pandemic and Trump declaring a national health emergency, right? So, and I'm fine blaming Trump for that here, for not acting sooner on the preventative measures with this new virus, right? He should be blamed on it there, but a lot of the spread isn't because necessarily China didn't act soon enough either. It's the nations, the Western nations, especially us here, that didn't act soon enough when it first landed here. We didn't take it seriously enough either, right? So this whole everything in China's got to do it here. So like China's just had another outbreak of it, and they're shutting down that city right away now. They're taking pretty active measures here. I'm not saying that they, they did good or did great or anything like that with their treatment of the virus and stuff and handling it, but it's not out of the norm for other countries, and to treat it like it is, and that it should, all these harsh punishments on China because they're the responsible for spreading it around and stuff. It's like, I mean, I don't know. There's like I said, it's indulging into a lot of his bigotry and stuff in there.
Because this isn't the first time. SARS came from China, and the bird flu, and the Hong Kong flu, the Asian flu.
All right, so the Asian flu and the Hong Kong flu are just describing flu pandemics, right? They're not. I mean, they're different strains of the flu, but avian flu's in birds all over the world, just like swine flu's in pigs all over the world, right? And they jump from animals and stuff here. And yes, the wet markets, the live animals and stuff there are a problem, and that's where transmission from animals to humans happens, right? In that setting, but it also happens to factory farm workers, right? Just like he's going to say the swine flu here. The swine flu pandemic 2009 2010 was originated in Mexico.
Viruses come from China like shortstops come from the Dominican Republic. If they were selling nuclear suitcases at these wet markets,
So where did he
nuclear suitcases
go back in
at
here?
China like shortstop. SARS came from China, and the bird flu.
But we don't call SARS the Chinese flu, right? We don't do that. We don't call bird flu the Chinese flu, right? These are all. So this is another point on. These are all names that aren't referring to China. The ones that he does, like the Hong Kong flu and the Asian flu. The Asian flu, I'm not necessarily sure if that's from China or if that's just generally in the Asian area, yeah, Eastern Asia, but.
And the Hong Kong flu, the Asian flu. Viruses come from China like shortstops
All right, so he hasn't said swine flu yet. That's going to come up next.
from the Dominican Republic. If they were selling nuclear suitcases at these wet markets, would we be so non-judgmental? And isn't this pretty close to what they are selling?
I mean, this is a false equivalency here, right? Of course, we'd have an issue if freely traded nuclear suitcases were going around at these things, right? But this just shows Bill's just complete lack of understanding how these viruses develop and spread, right? Like I said, the wet markets are an issue, but factory farms with a bunch of live animals around cause the same thing.
The next one could be even worse. If the Chinese military had purposefully infected this country with corona as a bioweapon, we'd be at war with them.
I mean, again, this is not equivalent situations, right? Viruses are going to come around there. Like I said, he brought up the hantavirus, right? Comes from Hanton River. No, it's a virus that exists all over the world, and there's just different strains, right? It didn't originate there. It's just that's where they happen to, I don't know, kind of discover and work with the virus, and so it was named after the region there. Not necessarily that it came from there, because there's strains that exist all over, and we named it differently, right? He doesn't understand how virus and stuff spread and do all this other stuff.
We're always griping about how China manipulates their currency. Well, I'm no monetary expert, but I think you would agree this one hurt our economy a little more than the currency manipulation. And China can do this. China once built a 57-story skyscraper in 19 days. There's been a pothole on my street for 19 years. They're not like us. They can actually get shit done. This is a dictatorship that for decades enforced a one-child per family policy under penalty of forced sterilization. But you can't close down the farmer's market from hell? They need to use that iron fist and pound it down like the whole world depends on it, because it kind of does. And I hope that if someone told Americans that eating Hot Pockets could cause a worldwide pandemic, that we would have the good sense to stop doing it. Although I wouldn't bet on it.
I mean, he makes the joke about how that stuff wouldn't change and stuff here. I don't know. Kind of seems that, I don't know where I'm going with that at the end of the year. But yeah, like, most of that video was garbage. It was dumb. There's reasons why we don't want to stigmatize certain people in certain regions and stuff like that when naming things, right? Because you know, see what happens to the Chinese Americans and stuff that suffer from that stuff. There, we can call it what it is. SARS-CoV-2, right? And it's not like coronavirus isn't something new either that we know about. We know about coronaviruses all over the world. But yeah, it has a name, SARS coronavirus 2, right? And that's what we can call it. But that's the end of that one.